Howdy, folks. It is Friday, and that means Kevin Allen is with us. We will do our intros in a minute, but we'll start with some pre-show stuff. Go ahead, Russ.
So I haven't been watching the KBO, but like anybody else, I see highlights and such. And the other day, one of their starters, Hui Kwan Yu, threw 49 miles an hour. Now, it wasn't like when Jose Reyes threw 49 miles an hour, and he just did it literally to get over the plate. This guy did it with purpose. And this guy did it exactly like Steve Hamilton did, Jack Hamilton, sorry. And I remember seeing him when I was very young, and I think he did it with the Yankees. And so I was just looking on YouTube, Kev, and it looked like he did it to Willie Horton. And it looks like Willie Horton swung at the apex of the pitch rather than waiting for it to come down because he must have gotten annoyed. And what I get annoyed at is guys around Mike's age and younger call it an eephus pitch, but that's a different pitch.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping Kevin could straighten out here because he's just a little bit older than me, and he definitely remembers Hamilton, maybe even remembers, some of those games. I don't know.
Yeah. Now you're talking about the
Foley floater.
Yeah. Well, at the time, Horton was an incredible fastball hitter, and he was hitting the ball a long way. He was embarrassing pitches, and the sentiment was slower you could throw it. He'd have to generate all the power behind it, but it was pretty incredible, and you never saw that. So at the time, I remember it was a most talked about thing. Like it was everywhere. People were talking about this this pitch, So I mean, that's all I remember about it.
That's fine. So and this guy just did the same thing and floated it in a regular game. But my contention is basically that, hey, this league, the reason this league is getting this exposure is because there is no Major League Baseball. But at the end of the day,
it's not going to really like draw.
It would never happen.
Yeah, it's not going to draw people away from the major leagues. I have to say, a couple years ago, they had not a batting cage, but a speed gun set up at the Bisons game, the AAA Buffalo Bisons, and I'm like, okay, I'm 51. I'm going to go in there and see what I can throw. I would say probably 10 years ago, could get into the mid to high 60s on my fastball. And obviously it's like you're not warming up, and so you're not going to have. So I threw it with all my might, and I threw it 48 miles an hour. And this guy, he's throwing basically an eephus pitch, and he's throwing the same speed. So, I'm definitely past my prime, Kev. But do you remember the eephus pitch? Because it was Dave LaRoche. I think he was with the Yankees at the time, and he threw this. Basically, it was a slow pitch softball pitch.
Yeah. Well, and the theory behind it makes a lot of sense. Especially like I'm surprised we don't see it today.
I was going to say
with the triple digit guys that we now see. I always remember, Ball 4, the Jim Bouton book, had such an impact on my life because, that was the first look we ever had, like inside the game of baseball in its crudest, realistic perspective. And I remember, I don't know if this story was in the Ball 4, or I'm glad you didn't take it personally, the sequel. I get them a little confused, but and I believe it was Hank Aaron, but it could have been someone else. But Bouton was the knuckleball pitcher. I guess it was in the original book.
It was in Ball 4, yeah.
Yeah, and
I read that one.
Was it Hank Aaron?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, well, so anyway, he throws the knuckle, and that thing's floating in there at 48, 50 mile an hour. And Bouton, who was a power pitcher when he came up, starts to think, I'm just going to rip a fastball by him. He's been watching this, knuckleball. He's sitting on this now, and he's expecting 48. And so he throws his best fastball up there. And like I said, I think it was Hank Aaron in a preseason game, but I could be wrong about who it was. But the guy hit it. Aaron hit it into orbit. And Bouton's comment was, I hate to think how far he would have hit it had I not fooled him so badly.
See, this is the thing. This is the thing about baseball. I mean, okay, there are a number of problems I have with the current game. One of them, though, is that the the artistry of pitching is basically gone. I mean, I'm not ripping on Syndergaard or flame throwing guys who throw 95 to 100 miles an hour, but really they're flamethrowers, and I don't think many of them are actual pitchers. They people with pure speed. The game in terms of Greg Maddux, who picked the corners, and granted back then he got the calls that were maybe 6 inches outside that he shouldn't have gotten. But a pitcher like John Tudor from the Cardinals, who was not a great pitcher, but he knew how to change speeds and pick the corners, or Jamie Moore. There was a whole bunch of guys who they got away with things on guile. The only guy I can remember, Kevin, was Frank Tanana, who was a flamethrower with the Angels, and then he blew out his arm. And when he was with the Tigers, he had a second career where he was just nibbling.
Yeah, he became Mike Cuellar. That's what he was doing. Yeah, and he ended up throwing, a lot of.
I think he had more wins as a slow ball pitcher than he did as a fastball.
Well, for sure. The one thing about Maddux was an incredible pitcher, but once he started building up those incredible statistics where he would have, a 0 or 1 strikeout or 1 walk in every game, I started to think that from watching, because the Cubs games were always on television, that, he always got the benefit of the doubt.
Yes. Because
he was Maddux. Yeah. So anything that was even close to the plate, it was a strike, where a wild pitcher wouldn't get that, call. And I don't think the umpires did it. I think it was just human nature. They're just used to going up with the right hand.
Right. And if he was number 1 in terms of getting the call, the number 2 was his future teammate in Atlanta, Tom Glavine. All he did was he'd throw about an inch outside, and then by inning 3, he's throwing 2 inches outside, and then he keeps moving, and they're still calling it a strike.
Yeah. You're right, though. Those were the guys that, those were the real pitchers as we knew it back then. Now it's you just rip it by the guy. So
right, and those pitchers don't get the calls because they have Quest Tech, and they those are called balls.
You're throwing changeups in the 80s now.
Yes,
because you were throwing 99 and 100. So
it looks a lot slower, I'm sure, as a batter.
Yeah, no, I get it.
These guys was really let's get going here. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, May 22nd, 2020.
I'm Michael Lagello, and we had to turn on our air conditioning today. What a change.
Russ Cullen from Sportsology, trying to wrangle my dog in the rain.
Kevin Allen, free agent.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I'm glad we have Kevin on today, because he's going to help finish this argument that we had at the end of the last show.
Oh, boy.
Because I put out an emergency text to Kevin yesterday.
I like how Russ said that.
Yeah.
Well, whose side am I going to be on, Russ?
I don't know.
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
Probably.
I have respect for your intelligence in terms of the game, so you're definitely going to be on Russ and my side.
All right. Here's the situation. Your parents went away on a week vacation. No. Okay.
You give the point. Let me give the counterpoint, and then let him decide.
All right. Okay. Here's my point. We were talking yesterday, and I said that the Montreal Canadiens are the owners and GMs and players are all extremely happy to be in the playoffs, and they would rather be in the playoffs than have what potentially would be the 6th pick versus like the 9th pick or however that's going to work. They'd rather have a shot at winning the Stanley Cup. That was my argument.
Okay. My argument was, for public consumption, their ownership and probably their general manager would say, yes, we're glad to be in the playoffs. But based on the track that they went on before the trade deadline, which was trading Kovalchuk and trading a couple other players, they had essentially said, okay, we're not making the playoffs. We're selling. We have 14 draft picks. We're heavily invested in the draft. Mark Bergevin cannot go out there and say, oh, we want to miss the playoffs or we want the lottery. But I think secretly in his head, he's saying, I think it's going to be more beneficial for us to have the 3rd or 4th pick in the draft than the 7th or 8th pick. Now,
wait, Mike, you said you're a little bit wrong. Let me finish that. Let me finish my argument a little bit. Again, you're saying that for public consumption, that's what they're saying, but deep down, inside, they're like, no, we don't want to be in the playoffs. because we'd rather have a shot at the first overall pick, which we don't think will be a shot at the first overall pick anyway.
Well,
Because
I'll let Russ say what he was
saying publicly and privately. They're excited to be in the playoffs.
I don't think privately they are, because again, they did set themselves up to trade away no talent, knowing that they weren't going to be in it, and they did set themselves up for draft success with the 13 picks. And again, if they go, let's say they even go one round, they're picking later every round than they want to be. Where this way, either they either have a shot at the first or a legit shot at the third pick, which again could be a franchise defenseman rather than the 12th or 13th or 15th pick if they were to go around. I'm telling you, they don't want to do that.
And we're talking specifically.
And there's no playoff revenue. That's the other thing.
Right.
There is no revenue. If there was revenue to offset this chance, I think that would make a difference. But right now, they're not getting revenue out of this either.
And we're talking specifically about Montreal here. We're not talking about a team that has a legit chance to win this Stanley Cup.
Competitively, I think these guys are competitors. I've never talked to anybody who wouldn't. If you gave them a sudden, like, this is bizarre because yes, they traded away their players for sure. They didn't think they were going to the playoffs, but at the same time, if you gave anybody on the final day of the season just say, "Hey, you know what? You're going to be in the playoffs," they would all be thrilled beyond belief because they're competitive people, and that's just the way they work. This is the way they are.
Well, I don't think that's true, because if you'd have said that to Steve Eisman and the Red Wings, he'd have said no. I'll take my shot.
Well, Eisman has a legitimate, he's a shot.
Yeah. Here's what I think about that. Like, I think the fact that it's Montreal makes a difference. And but like if you said that of Chicago, I would side definitely, without question, with Mike and Russ. But Montreal is a little bit different animal. Montreal is Montreal and its history, and everyone knows what Montreal is like in the opening round of the playoffs. Yep. Montreal also has Carey Price. We saw Larry Brooks write a story basically saying, the fear of Carey Price as well. So I think I would say within the organization, I bet it's split 50-50. I bet there are people who, obviously the players are thrilled because they don't care about the draft pick. I would say the coach is thrilled because, Bergeron's an ex-player and he's a competitive SOB. So I think he's thinking, I want my shot. I'll take my shot with Carey Price. I think because it's Montreal, they're happy to be in the playoffs. So
that's interesting. I appreciate you, first of all, Judge Kevin has sided with my opinion. But the other thing I wanted to say here is this, that I disagree with.
You didn't hear the 50-50 split part.
I not 50-50 if Bergeron, the coach, and the players.
But that's not 50% of the organization. That's what Kevin was saying. They probably are split.
Yeah, I'm sure. Within the organization, I'm sure there are some that are unhappy, and like the whole scouting department is, I'm sure, disconsolate.
Right.
About this. But, it's Montreal. Like, I know Russ has been there during the playoffs. Like, it's a different animal.
It is.
Yeah. Like, it's hard to describe.
It's incredible in the playoffs. Yeah. And it's incredible all the time there, but it's incredible in the playoffs. And
and so even if they're, obviously they won't be in Montreal, but or at least we don't think they will be. But it will still be huge. And I think the Carey Price factor, and I wrote in my little thing today, like, just because Murphy's Law will be in place, I'm just sure that either the Penguins will lose to Montreal or
Edmonton will lose to Chicago.
Yeah, just because like everybody's talking about that, like there was no way they were going to get in the playoffs. Like I was a big believer in giving the bubble teams a big chance, but I didn't need to go all the way down to Chicago and Montreal. They weren't getting in the playoffs.
Like here's a good example.
Okay.
With Chicago, had they ever had an inkling they really could make the playoffs, they wouldn't have traded Robin Lehner to a team that might, Las Vegas, who probably has the best goalie tandem now and a terrific chance to win the cup. They handed that to them.
Yeah, but I do think, no one could have predicted where they're going to be at. So I don't know that you can, like, I think it's irrelevant what they did at the trade deadline because the pandemic just changed everything.
Right.
But I think Chicago might have, for the chance to be in the lottery and all that, because there's obviously they've got problems in Chicago. So
yeah, and you have to say Crawford played well after the deadline. He carried the ball with them. You've got Kane and Taves and a guy like DeBrincat and Keith in a short series, and we know Edmonton's problems in goal. So I mean, it's completely possible that Chicago could pull off an upset. But the funny thing is, Kev, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but it seemed to be an argument for these preliminary round games or the series to be best of 3, and then the article from Larry Brooks came out about Price, and all of a sudden the first round would be best of 5. They almost like wanted to shoot down the possibility of a goaltender stealing a series by extending the series from best of 3 to best of 5.
Yeah, well, I mean, that makes some sense. I mean, because the longer you go, the better team should prevail. Should win out. I'm really the wrong guy to ask on that, because I've long said, I used to write for years, for longer than a decade. I wrote a column at USA Today where I always had my emotional side arguing with my intellectual side.
Right.
I would present both things, and emotionally, I can't embrace. Like, even though intellectually I know that it's better for the Lions to lose games at the end of the NFL season, that's not how I'm wired.
Yeah.
If I got a team, I want them to win regardless of what is going on in the standings. Now, intellectually, I understand that it makes no sense for them to win that game.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't get past that. So,
and I said this yesterday. I said there are two different things here. There is what would be better for them, and there's what they'd want. And there honestly are different.
You know what? Price hasn't proven himself in the playoffs ever. He's not been a great playoff goaltender. He has not.
But he still carried Price. I mean,
I know.
Ed Belfour wasn't a great playoff goalie until he was.
So he won.
A good Olympic.
Steve Yzerman was not a top playoff performer until he was.
I think they went. I don't think they went as far as Price has in his career without any of that success, though.
And the one year that he did stand on his head, he got taken out by Chris Kreider's collision into the crease. So I mean, he was great in those playoffs until that point.
Yeah. A couple things I want to get to today. One is I want to get to Kevin's article, which is on HockeyBuzz, which is really fun. 8 predictions, early predictions for this, the 24-team NHL format. But before we get to that, let's talk about the format for a second, as it's been kind of laid out, as it's being voted on. And it feels like it's going to pass. That there's going to get it. It feels like, although all the players aren't definitely not on board, there's enough players on board to make this go through it. That's what it feels like.
I mean, it's kind of like the legal system. A lawyer doesn't ask any question he doesn't already know the answer to. You don't put it up for a vote unless it's
That's exactly what I said the other day about when they put up for the vote for the Board of Governors. I'm like, there's no way Bettman's not having that meeting unless he knows what the Board of Governors are going to say.
So what you're saying is Gary Bettman is imitating Mitch McConnell right now.
No, but in this case, Donald Fear is. Donald Fear is, with the PA. He knows he's got enough votes. But the actual format itself, can we assume when they're doing it this way that we're looking at 2 cities? I mean, that's the only way this is going to work, right?
Yeah, that looks like it's 2 cities.
I mean, the way they're setting this up, the only way it can work is having 12 teams in a city and 12 teams in another city.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's better that way, I think. I mean,
it is.
You try to get this, just having everything condensed there, and there's only one arena you got to set up and secure. And it made sense. Like, it's so funny. Originally, like, it made perfect sense for them to go to neutral sites, and then somebody said to me, "Well, it was a GM who told me, well, now we're thinking it'll be an NHL city because the television things are already set up. Everybody knows what to do and all that." And then you go, "Well, of course, that makes sense."
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And I've heard it. That they really want to go in an NHL/NBA city. I heard that's something I heard today, which is interesting. It could be wrong, but the concept behind that was that you're looking at arenas that have 4 solid dressing rooms, 4 solid locker rooms in NHL and NBA arenas, right?
That would be weird because both of the like, say for example, right now it's Vegas and Edmonton, which have been rumored.
Right, which are not that, right? So
both of them are not. Yeah.
I mean, but then the counter argument to that. And I had one person say that to me today. I'm just bringing it up there, but the counter argument to that is, okay, I've heard different things about. They want to play multiple games in a day. Obviously, they're going to play, especially if they have 12 teams in one city, they're going to play multiple games in a day. That's going to take longer with 12 teams in one city than it would if you had 6 and 6 and then you had 4 cities. You could play that quicker.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about that though is, you're going to have to be cleaning out locker rooms completely between situations. So you're going to need at least 4 locker rooms because you're going to have one team getting ready
to alternate. Yeah,
and you can put locker rooms like say like they do like with the media area.
You can put locker rooms in the hallways.
You can put a locker room on the concourse.
Yeah, and don't forget, they're going back to their hotels, in their uniforms to shop. So,
right.
So you don't need
this in there, and they're still gonna have to clean. I think
they will need a practice rink though. They're not going to be able to have practice at the places they're having 3 games a day though. So in that city, they're going to have to use another rink to practice in, or another side of the rink to practice in. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's why that rink in the Orleans and Vegas.
That's why that works out. That's why in Edmonton the multiple sheets works out.
I really like the concept of 6 teams in one place because you could do, so you have the NHL locker room. You could have locker rooms that were specific to those teams the whole time. Like to me, that would be something that would be beneficial because if granted, you're going to clean them out anyway, but why not have specific locker rooms for those teams? And you can but setting up 12 of them in one arena, even if you're using the concourse, it's not possible, right? So 6, you could have like 4, 2 in the NHL, 2 in the NBA, and then 2 somewhere on the concourse, like in behind things or whatever. I think that
if they're dressing at home, well, I don't know. That seems a bit much. Like you can't dress in your hotel. Yeah.
Yeah, they still have to have a place where they're going to go between periods. They have a place where they're going to go,
bathroom breaks, things of that nature.
Yeah, there's going to have to be a place for that. And I would rather that be something that's secure to each team individually and have that team be responsible for cleaning it, and have the whole, or, whatever. I think that makes sense. But that's just one little thing I saw in the whole thing.
Here's another thing, Eck, though, and this is something that baseball fans went crazy over. Major League Baseball has put in some of their new rules that, hey, when guys are on the bench waiting to get in the game, waiting to bat, they're going to be wearing masks. And people were going crazy over that, but you're literally sitting right next to the guy. You have to do that.
Right.
That is the safest way. Now, for hockey, if they have those, even with a helmet, they're a little bit better off than a baseball player. But I would have to say you can't let players spit anymore. You shouldn't let them spit on the bench.
Everybody is. I don't know. Not everybody has played the game, but if you look at the bottom of what goes down at the bottom of the bench,
gross.
And you clear your nostril by
snot pockets.
You can't do that.
I don't know. Like I wondered whether or not they would, since there's no fans, you just clear out and extend, take away the glass and create a longer bench.
That would be a great idea.
You could do that.
And then put the other team on the other side.
Why not do that? That's a really fantastic.
That's an interesting idea.
Or have players sitting like in the front row so they could just hop over.
Well, that's what in baseball, obviously they're sitting in the stands. So
sure.
So, but that's a little bit different. They're not changing on the fly, although baseball would be better if they had to do that.
It'd be more exciting.
Well, okay. I'm not going to destroy or bash the 24-team format as we've heard it is. I do, again, Kev, find the sort of top 4 tournament to determine seeds a little ridiculous because honestly, if I'm John Cooper in Tampa or Bruce Cassidy in Boston or the coach in Washington or the coach in Philadelphia, I am not going to play my top players in a best of 3. I'm not going to play them all 3 games, risking a Marchand or Bergeron or a Stamkos getting hurt in games that are deciding seeding. In a couple of those games, if I'm Boston and Tampa, I'm playing the Syracuse Crunch and I'm playing the Providence Bruins because I don't want my key players getting hurt right before the meaningful games.
Yeah, no, I think that stuff's a fair comment, but I just expect it is kind of what it is, and we're just going to have to kind of accept.
Sure,
it.
I don't understand why they're not doing one thing, which would make those teams so much better, which is reseeding every round. Like there's no point. This whole point that whoever wins the first place is going to play either 5 or 12 makes no sense.
No, you can't let them reseed.
Here's the better question.
You can't let them reseed.
Why? There's no reason.
Well,
the better question is why are so many people against that? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah.
Against reseeding?
Against reseeding, yeah.
I'll tell you why. Because when they did that, I get it why they did that in the NFL because it's a short season. So if you're the 8th team, let's say, and you beat the first, you take over their slot, that's fine. This is a much longer season. You've made it now very easy for a bottom team to take over a team that had a much better record than you, where other teams still have a better record than you, and now you may have a more advantageous path. I don't like it. I don't think you should reseed.
The best team should always play the not best, like the worst team in every round. They're quarantined together. They're quarantined together in the same city.
No, there was no point in becoming the best team then.
No, there isn't
a point then. That's the whole point of becoming the best team is the best team should either have a bye or have at least one big advantage, but you shouldn't, every bottom team should not get a shot at the best team, because you know what? The best team's going to get knocked off eventually that way because they're a target on their back. It's not fair. It's more motivating for the worst team to play the best team each round. That's way more motivating.
I think so. That's interesting. I really would much rather if I'm the best.
Just think about when you've ever played. If you're playing in a softball tournament and you're playing the best team and you've been the worst, you really are like, you know what? I am sick of these guys. I want to kill them. But if you're playing the fifth best team, you won't feel the same way. You'll still want to win, but you won't have that same kind of hatred.
You don't predict game like when you're in the playoffs. Stars, I heard you predict things. You don't predict playoffs based on that. Like you don't say, okay, this team's so much worse than that team, they're probably going to win. Like you would say that it's like if the Capitals were playing like say the Red Wings versus the Capitals playing the Columbus Blue Jackets.
No, I disagree. I picked sweeps a couple times. That happened. I picked the Rangers to sweep the Thrashers. That happened.
Well, it's interesting. I think that's that's interesting. I mean, that definitely, because I don't think that makes sense. Like if I'm going to play these first three games, I'm going to play these first three games to get that really top seed to play the worst team all the time.
Yeah, but Russ, you're a little bit different guy. I always talk.
I'm sure I am.
Because I always tell people you're one of the few guys I know that you believe that you're right all the time. When you make predictions,
you got two people on the show like that.
I mean, when Russ makes his prediction, he talks as if that's what's going to happen. He lays it all out, and I always find it amazing because I'm a huge doubter of my own ability. So I'm going, well, and I think about everything. Russ just goes in and says, well, this is what's going to happen. Now, I don't think you get it any more right than I do, but you're confident when you do it. And this is what, you always say, well, this is going to happen. So,
I mean, what do you think, Kevin? Which way do you think it should go here? Do you think they should be reseeding every time or? Oh,
no, I'm not a seeding. I like the bracket.
You like brackets?
Yeah, I do. I'm just a traditionalist about it, but I don't understand why everybody, is not at least willing to discuss it. So many people are they can't do it.
Well, there's one thing.
You can have the NHL contest or whatever on NHL.com, right? You can fill out a bracket. That's the only thing. That's the only benefit I see.
I don't find it that big of a deal. And the thing is, it actually is set up. If they go with the brackets, if they wanted to do 4 hubs, they could, because the bracket would stay the same. You'd have the one in one bracket, the two in the other. It would be an NCAA type of format, and you could do that if you wanted to go to 4 hubs. But if you're in 2 hubs,
you can't do that with the first round. You can't do that with the top 4 teams playing each other. So
no.
Here's a question.
That's why they're doing it in one place.
Yeah.
Here's a fun question. There were so many people who were opposed to, the more simplified formats that were being discussed about, single elimination, best of 3 series, and all that. So now that some teams will have to win 5 rounds, are we going to say that this is the hardest that anyone ever had to work in order to win? Because before they were saying, well, it's an asterisk because they didn't have to work that hard. So now are we going to say if the Penguins win the cup, are we going to say that's the hardest anyone? That's the longest and most.
It's not 16 wins on the road to Stanley. It's 19 wins on the road to Stanley.
But they're healthy.
Except for the 4 top teams.
Well, the NHL is going to call it like those that first round is not going to be counted.
Right.
So
at the playoff, right?
Yeah. So that's fair.
Well, let me just ask Kevin: Are they going to be counted as regular season points, or are they going to be counted as? Because
I got no idea. Yeah. But I can bet. For goal scoring, we're going to count the last 16 games. I'm almost sure of that. And and everything else. And they don't, they're calling them what, play-in games. They're not even calling them playoff games.
Yeah,
so then that's to me, if it's a play-in game, regular season stats would count, like goals and whatever. Like,
Austin Matthews would like to get 50 goals. He's got 47.
You can't call it regular season because some teams aren't getting to play those games. You can't.
Right. I know, but I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it. Eck, here's something though that we were talking about before you got on. So Scott Wheeler came up with this take, which I really think is a lousy take, and I think other people think this way, but I wish they didn't anymore. And so basically, he put out that look, he hates the 2014 format, but basically said that if Florida and Arizona were the teams getting in and not the Rangers and Montreal, is that even possible? Because he's basically making it sound like, well, they did it just for the Rangers and Montreal. And my counter to that is a couple of weeks ago, the Rangers and Montreal were out in the way they were doing it. Now, because of this collective effort, this is the final answer. So they're in, but they're not in because it's the Rangers and Montreal. They're really not.
But the problem is, the only reason we're at 24 teams is that it works.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, that's the problem. Like, they know it. I mean, everybody knows that it doesn't make that much sense to have Chicago and Montreal in, but you can't have 22 teams.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Right. It doesn't work.
I think they would have put in Florida and Arizona just as easily because the math worked. I really don't think it's the market or anything like that. I think this is the way they looked at it this way, and this is the way it came out. And I just think that's a lazy narrative. I do.
I do. I think that. I mean, aren't these the top 12 teams in each conference? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? I mean,
and
and between 12 and 13 in each conference, there's a pretty significant thing. There's like 4 or 5 points or something like that. So,
well, see, the way I looked at it, 20 was too few and 24 was too more.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So they couldn't. You can't play at 22.
Right. I think you're right. And the Rangers were like 3 points out. So it's close enough. I mean, that's just. You can't. I mean, the Chicago Blackhawks were more than that out, but they were coming strong too. So,
I mean, because my argument would be, you don't think the NHL would want Joel Quenneville in the playoffs? He's fantastic in the playoffs.
So here's the next question is, and we know that there are players out there that don't want to play.
Yes.
So are they not going to play? Do we think there are going to be players out there?
I think there might be a few. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I don't.
You can't force them.
If I had to guess, I'd guess no, because it's just that hockey is always such a team concept that the peer pressure alone, not that anybody would call players, but they'd feel it. So I guess there won't be, but
I'll tell you why there might be. The only reason I think there might be is the same thing that happened in WWE. One of their champions, Roman Reigns, had underlying conditions because he had cancer. And I think there are going to be some players that we don't know that have underlying conditions that are not going to take the risk.
Here's one, and he hasn't said anything yet, but here's one that has an underlying condition we know about. Max Domi is a type 1 diabetic.
Right.
Yeah, so that's an underlying condition.
He's going to play. Yeah.
He's going to play. Of course he's going to play.
Yeah, I mean, there are other issues too that
I bet you players are consulting their doctors and trying to get the best answer if they do have a condition that we don't know about. And I'm not saying it's going to be a lot, but it wouldn't shock me if there's 1 or 2.
Well, it made some sense too. Like I just talked to a friend of mine today who revealed to me, I did not know that he has an underlying condition. And he basically said, I'm probably never going to go in a bar again, not because of the underlying condition, but because of the people that are in a bar for COVID-19.
Right.
That I'm just scared to death.
Yeah.
I know somebody like that too, actually. Let's go to Kevin's article, which is 8 interesting predictions for the NHL. The first one you kind of touched on a little bit, but not completely, but we've definitely talked about this on the podcast enough, is early upsets will infuriate some fan bases. And
that's a guarantee.
It has to be. And you know what's going to happen because, first of all, the NHL always has upsets, number one. And secondly, it's just Murphy's Law. Whatever will infuriate the greatest number of people will occur. And this is what's going to happen. So somebody's going to be.
And it was hilarious, Kev, that yesterday the premier of Quebec comes out and says, well, the one shame if the Montreal Canadiens win the Stanley Cup is there won't be able to be a parade in Montreal. It's like I'm sure that's on the top of the list of everybody's concerns right now. Like honestly,
you think they don't want to go to the playoffs?
Yeah, but don't you think he was just having a little fun with that?
Yeah,
maybe.
We need a little laugh.
He was having some fun with it.
Yeah.
I will say this, and where Kevin's 100% right, at least in hockey, there is a chance that some of those teams would win. In the NBA, those teams almost never win. It's almost like fait accompli. They have practically no chance at all. But in hockey, it's different.
I mean, the difference between 10 and 24 really isn't that great.
So, right,
Russ, I'm pretty sure that there's only been one 8-1 upset in the history of the NBA.
I think you're right. Yeah,
it was the Nuggets over the Lakers, and with Dikembe Mutombo. I don't think and we know that's happened a bunch of times in the NHL. So if you're a favorite in the NBA, you're golden.
Right.
Let's look at these matchups briefly, and like say, what are the upsets that could be? And Montreal Pittsburgh is obviously one. Kevin, you've already said that one. That's the one that Pittsburgh goes down to Montreal. I don't think there's a chance. I know that if you have Carey Price, you have a puncher's chance. I think Pittsburgh is really, really good. They'll be completely healthy. I think there's a better chance of Chicago upsetting Edmonton than there is Montreal. I think it's a very scary series for Edmonton. Extremely.
Yeah, I do too. And I think Pittsburgh and Montreal would be a 1 out of 10 chance of beating him. I think Pittsburgh's a good team.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, but then some of the other ones like Nashville, Arizona. That's I think okay. I think Nashville will be okay in that series, but Arizona, you never know what Arizona team's going to show up, right? So,
if Kemper is healthy, they're a different team with Kemper in goal than they are with Ronta.
Yeah, I just don't know they score enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Carolina and New York Rangers, to me, that's almost a toss-up at times. That's for
sure.
I have a stat for you. So here's the toss-up. Remember how I had said that I would never use Georgiev as the number 2 goalie. I would use Lundqvist. You kind of wonder now if David Quinn would even change that and start Lundqvist because he's 25-5 against Carolina since 2011. And you do kind of wonder, would he try that out? Because Lundqvist is right. At least for a game, at least start him and see what you have. Because if all of a sudden Henrik Lundqvist in his mind feels like this is my last go at it, and all of a sudden you've got magic, you might have some magic there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a toss-up series. I want to take Carolina, but that feels like a 6-4 series to me.
It feels like it, doesn't it? It really does.
I'll just say this: the last goaltender to win a game for Carolina was named David Ayers.
The Islanders in Florida, again, 7-10, but I think those teams are pretty friggin' even too. I think that that's close as well. I don't see much of a difference between those teams. I mean, it comes down to goaltending for both of them, and both of them don't know how.
You know what? The interesting thing is, I think the coaches are similar. I think the Islanders have better defense, and Florida has better scoring, but the coaches are going to play it the same. So I could see that series being extremely tight.
Really tight.
Bob could really recoup his season if he actually comes out and has a great series against the Islanders.
He really could.
The most talented people on both teams are the head coaches.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Toronto and then Toronto-Columbus, which is a really fascinating series on so many levels.
Not according to Mike.
No, it's fascinating, but Toronto's
best matchup that they've had in a long time in the first round of the playoffs, Mike. You don't have to.
Please.
At least they're not playing Boston.
Washington. Yeah, that statement. That statement is ridiculous. But no, I mean Columbus. I think if you put a list of the top 5 teams that I think have the best chance, as opposed from March to July, it's Columbus because they were without so many players. Seth Jones. A couple other defensemen, Cam Atkinson, Bjorkstrand, all of those guys will be healthy. Now, does that mean that they're going to win the series? No, but they have a good chance because they were playing really good defense under Tortorella. They were playing great at the break. They're getting all their players back. Toronto's getting some players back too, but I think Columbus has a good chance. Would have a good chance against Toronto.
But
I do too. I think Toronto just got a bad break by first of all they missed on the top. 4. So, right. So they got to play this extra round, and then they got to play Columbus. And I just talked to Ryan Hedger, their beat writer, and they've got everybody back except for Josh Anderson, not Dubinsky. Okay. but they weren't expecting him.
They weren't expecting Dubinsky.
Yeah. So everybody's back. So that means Atkinson, Seth Jones, and they're always hard to play against. They always are.
I think the worry here for the Leafs. Look, the Leafs have the better goalie. The Leafs have more scoring, but they don't have the better coach. They have a rookie coach, and at the end of the day, that could end up being the biggest factor in this whole series.
I think it'll be the best matchup the Leafs out of all 24 teams. This is the best team they could play.
I disagree. I
agree 100%, and this is why, because Columbus is although Columbus, you're right. I mean, they're getting those guys back, but they are kind of like whoever plays for them. They play basically the same kind of team. Then you're not talking about superstars coming back. Seth Jones is a superstar. I'll say yes, 100%. But
I think Atkinson's an important get too.
Yeah, but at the same time, Columbus still, even with everybody healthy in their lineup, they don't have a ton of scoring. They're not like they aren't a scoring team.
But they are
the biggest weakness, their defense. Defensively, Toronto is horrible. So this is like to me, that's the one thing that matches up perfectly for them in this series.
Yeah, but Toronto's defensive ability wasn't improved at the deadline. They allow teams that are challenged offensively to score goals because of how bad defensively they are at times. They would rather play a wide open offensive team and outscore them than a team that is gonna try to beat them 2-1. They get frustrated.
Okay.
It's not a good matchup. I'm telling you.
Leafs Rangers is a better matchup for the Leafs because they play a similar style. The Rangers defense is no deeper than the Leafs. The goaltending is about even, or the Leafs have the edge. And the Leafs have the better scoring. Like the Leafs would be the clear favorite and have a better chance against the Rangers, I think.
And I'm telling you right now, the Leafs are rooting for everybody but Boston to win the #1 seed if they actually get by Columbus, because I think they could play wide open against Tampa, they could play wide open against Washington, and wide open against Philly. If they play against Boston, it'll be the same Peterborough freeze that they've played against them 3 times in the last decade, and they will get beat.
I think the biggest nightmare in all of these playoffs is for the Boston Bruins, because they were on such a roll that if for some reason they don't get on the same roll, this whole season is going to get dismissed by them, by the fans, by everybody. It's going to be like, oh, look, another President's Trophy team, goes down early. But they really were on a roll, and there's no guarantee any team that was playing that way is going to still have the same chemistry when it restarts.
For sure.
One of my predictions, and my 8 predictions, was is that early on, offense will be ahead of defense. And I said that because I talked to a number of people who have said that, good defense, offenses, as I wrote, is creativity, it's skill, it's hands, where defense is hard work, commitment, and rhythm and consistency. Yeah. And, like the Bruins are still going to be a great defensive team, but maybe not right away. Everyone will be out of sync. It's a feel for when you cover up for which guy, and they haven't played in a while. So, eventually they're going to be, Bruins, and the Bruins, of course, great offensively and defensively, but their offense will be ahead of their defense when we start out. How long it will take them to get in sync, or for the good defensive team. So early on, I think Toronto has an advantage because they're, a great offensive team.
Yeah.
What about that?
And another prediction of yours, which goes right along with that, we might see 1980s style individual statistics.
I think it's possible. Yeah,
serious points being put up by certain players, because, and you're right. I mean, I think the energy will be intense. I think because with all this time off and everybody being cooped up, I can't wait to see the kind of energy they come out with. I think
they're fresh. They're not.
Here's a good one to talk about for the seeding process. So the Flyers would have to play Boston, Tampa, and Washington.
Right.
Now, we all love Carter Hart, but if these teams are really playing their full lineups and are really trying their best to get seeding, that is a tough scenario for the Flyers to get a high seed.
Yeah, you play them 2 games and you play Elliott the 3rd game. You don't play your #1 goaltender all 3 in any of these teams.
Right. Yeah. But I'm just saying the teams you're playing are some of the better playoff caliber teams in the league.
What about the West? The West.
Yeah, I mean, well, like finishing off the West, Vancouver, Minnesota, which is one of Kevin's things as well, and so I wanted to hold off on it, is the Wild will beat the Vancouver Canucks in their play-in round. Why do you think this, Kevin?
Well, I just think because all season long, Vancouver has been a momentum, good story, confidence team. Mm-hmm. They just felt good about themselves, and they just have kept winning. and I think it's hard to go to a long break and then rediscover that magic. And Minnesota, I think Everson sort of brought them to who they really are. Like, I think they all of a sudden realize how they can play and be effective. And I don't think they got hot. I think they just now know how to play and be effective. So I don't think it was a momentum that made them as hot as they were over the last month of the season. So they figured it out.
But it was funny. It was funny, Kev, that they got most of their wins over the last 2 or 3 weeks with Alex Stalock in goal and not Dubnyk. And most of the time it's been Dubnyk, and he's been that number one guy who plays a lot of games and carries the team. And Stalock has essentially been a number 2 for his entire career. Which, I mean, I don't know. They're just going with the hot hand, but that was unusual for them.
I don't know if they will go with the hot hand. Remember, Dubnyk had a family problem.
Yes, he did.
And so maybe if all of that is settled, you will see a better Dubnyk. And if they feel like they're getting that, he probably gets the start, but maybe gets a quick hook if all of a sudden he doesn't look good again, and then knowing that Stalock was hot. But I could see him starting with Dubnyk just because of that situation. It wasn't necessarily because of his play.
I agree. I think that's what you have to do because, like Kevin said about the momentum is gone. Like Stalock was on a run, but that's done.
Correct.
That's not, he was having a great time, but it's done. And Dubnyk at the end of the day, he's your guy. He should be your guy at least. So then
he's a bigger guy. He covers more net. Yeah.
Yep. Kevin has American TV playoff ratings will be better than usual. I completely agree with that. I think we're great ratings.
UFC
NBA is going to be playing too, though.
They may NBA will be playing too. Yeah.
So they won't be. Originally I thought they might be through the roof, but I think they'll just be better.
What the interesting thing is, though, with network television, it's not the case with Netflix and the streaming services. They always have filler shows, this time of the year when their season's over. They don't seem to have as many now because a lot of the filming got shut down because of the virus. So I think they're going to be more sports viewers regardless, because I don't think there's going to be as much content. And everybody for the last 3 months has been loading up on watching all those services. There's not going to be a ton to watch going forward.
Let's just say, Russ, there's going to be a lot of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire this summer because they've been doing it with nobody in the crowd and just like Jimmy Kimmel and whoever the contestant is.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like that.
Watch figure skating over that.
No
offense to Jimmy Kimmel.
I like this. Early scrums and physical encounters will be weird. I think that's no question about it.
Yeah.
I think it'll be weird for us. I don't think they're going to care.
I think it's going to be hard. Hockey tradition is pushing and shoving after the whistle.
I know.
And I just don't know that they're going to be, when you get in their face, I think it's going to be weird. I wonder if they're going to ban fighting.
Do you think Brad Marchand's really going to ease up on that, Kev? I don't.
See, Kev, I mean, I've heard people argue about this. In the end, I don't think that they're going to – I mean, I think they're going to tell players, stay away from this stuff, try to calm it down. But you can't really – I'm not saying there's not a lot of fighting in playoff hockey anyway.
No,
but scrums and hitting and things of that nature, there's going to be contact. It's not playoff hockey if you don't have contact. So I think
they're not going to – if you're suggesting they're going to – change the rules for that. There's no
good.
way.
Good.
And then I don't think Tom Wilson has one clean shift. I don't think he does anything different.
Finally, Kevin says the player will test positive, which will definitely happen. I mean,
that'll definitely happen.
I mean, that's got to happen. No, one of the things I thought about, we're going to be playing multiple games in the same day, right? And do we think we're going to be maybe seeing 3 games a day?
I think 3.
Okay,
we're going to be Olympic style.
Style. Therefore. How does that work in the playoffs with long overtimes? I mean, there's a rub there, isn't there? I mean, if you've got a game that goes into 2 or 3 overtimes, what happens? And my thought was, would they? I mean, I don't think there's any way they're going to a shootout in the playoffs.
They won't do it.
No.
But could they go to a 4-on-4 20?
We'll have fewer teams as we move along.
Right.
Right. Early on, we could have really get things messed up.
Well, I think they'll delay the next game. That's all they'll do. They'll say, "Hey, look, the next game is going to start an hour later."
I think once we get into the final 4 rounds, I think it'll be 2 games a day.
Right.
Okay, yeah, then it'll be easier for sure.
Right.
But with 3 games a day, could they go to 4-on-4 overtimes?
They'll never do it.
Do you think they'll just play it out and if we have
No,
That's the one thing I've always been told by the NHL. They will never win on
this
that.
situation before. I mean, I wouldn't, as a fan, I wouldn't hold it against them. I'm saying,
I know, but it's
20-minute overtime, like play as many overtime as you have to win, but just go 4-on-4. Which,
but this is going down the road where I think that the NHL won't go. It's like, you do not want to undermine the credibility of your playoff. And I understand there's a pandemic going on. There's, things are having to be adjusted, but you don't want to undermine the Stanley Cup championship by changing the rules because of this. Create space, start games earlier, delay games. That's all fine and good, but you cannot go down that road. You really can't.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can't, but I don't think that is really a road too far in this situation. Given the situation.
I don't think they will. I mean, I just can't.
Yeah.
Eck, I also have an idea of how to revise the draft lottery, and I could say it in a couple seconds when you're done with this.
Got Kevin frozen for now.
Yeah.
There he goes.
All right. Yeah. So we were froze for a second. You don't think they will, Kev? Huh?
I don't. I think they'll play regular overtime because you can just do one game at 2 and 8. We don't get 5-hour games very often. So.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Yep. We have to get there. Okay. Now. Okay. So Russ, you have an idea about the
for the draft lottery? Get those 7 GMs into like an empty studio, space them apart 6 feet apart. Get a giant dartboard. On the dartboard, you put water balloons with the draft pick number in it. And at the same time, you have all the GMs throw a dart at the water balloon. Now, some of these guys are former Ivy League guys, so they're probably good at darts already. Right. And this would give, someone like the Sabres, I bet your Botterill is probably better at darts than some of the other guys. But then you've added excitement to the draft lottery, and now you've added a little bit of a physical element where all of a sudden the GM has to be a little bit of an athlete to see where they end up in the draft. I think it would be tremendous television.
I cannot remember who, and I'm looking for it right now. I can't remember who proposed this, but they basically and I don't know if this is serious or not, but they were talking about having a lottery of the 7 teams and having the top 7 picks selected like now, like after the lottery within 24 hours, having those top 7 picks and then have the rest of the draft afterward. Now, I don't know about that because
I don't know about that either.
Yeah, I mean,
it kind of want these guys that it kind of takes away like the whole trading things and all different kinds of stuff.
That's why I think a lot of people want the draft after is obviously because of the whole trading thing. And if you want to have a Lafreniere and Byfield and a few others taken, and Drysdale and a few other taken like in June, great, and it's an event, but you want the rest of that draft. I mean, I can see a theory behind that, but I don't know if it's real.
No, they won't do that.
Yeah. I don't think they will. I would doubt it. Do you guys? If you guys, I went down like a rat hole the other day. It's pretty funny. Like a rat hole on the internet, and the internet. So on the internet, and I'm looking up. I find out, that in 1919 the Stanley Cup wasn't completed, right? And you guys may know this story.
Yes.
And it really is more fascinating than I thought it was, though. Like reading about how that went down. Between Seattle and Montreal, and it was just, which is fascinating in and of itself because we have a Seattle team coming back now.
Is that like the Seattle Millionaires?
Yeah, it was the Seattle.
Yeah.
The Seattle Millionaires. I think it was. Yeah.
It wasn't the Sasquatch.
Right. They won the.
But notice the Seattle team had a name. That's what I'm trying to point out here.
Yes, I have it. So they won the 1919 like NCHL or whatever it was called over there.
Right.
Which was like a totally different thing. And this is when so the winner of the NHL played that winner for the Stanley Cup, because this is when the Stanley Cup was still, and the way the thing played out, which is fascinating, is they never finished it because of the pandemic.
Right.
And it's like it's a great story. Like it's just, first of all, they played with different rules. I found this out. Did you know this? That if you were like when they had alternating games, all the games were played in Seattle. And that was the rule, that every year they would alternate. Like all the games would play in the NHL city or all the games would play in the other city. But the rules were different, and I couldn't find out the different rules. I was looking everywhere for them. But 2 games were played with the NHL rules, and 2 games were played with the PCHL rules. That was.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
And I just think
like DH and no DH.
Right.
Yeah, it's like kind of like that. the games were pretty epic. Seattle won 2 of the first 3, and then the 4th game was like considered one of, and it's historical in some ways because it was game 4 is considered like one of the greatest games ever played. It was when I was reading about this article. It ended in a 0-0 tie. The Montreal Canadiens goalie was George Vezina, who blocked every shot, right? And at the end of the first period, there was a goal that was waved off, and it ended in a tie after 20 minutes of overtime. And this infuriated everybody so much that is why we play until a winner happens.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't realize that.
They changed the rule in the NHL that in the playoffs you'll play till the winner happens because this game ended after a 20-minute overtime, and they just said that's it. I mean, this whole thing that happened. So Montreal then for the next game, like, so Seattle's up 2-1 with a tie. Like, there's a tie in there, and then Montreal wins the 5th game or whatever it was to make it 2-1. By like convincing everybody that they should play with the NHL rules because that game ended in a tie. And it wasn't supposed to be played with the NHL rules. But they did play with the NHL rules. Somehow Montreal convinced them that they should do that. And Montreal wins that game. And then after that game, after all that's played, 12 of the players on Seattle were hospitalized with the pandemic.
Yeah, that's what I remember that it was the numbers. Yeah, it was the numbers that made them stop playing. If it would have just been some players, they probably would have been able to carry on.
Yeah.
It was the Seattle Metropolitans.
Metropolitan, thank you.
Oh, Metropolitans.
Which is why I like that name. That's why I
played the Canadians, and Joe Hall was one of the top players. That would be like a top line player, and he was one of the players that was ill, and he died 4 days after they announced that the series was abandoned, as they call it. That was the official term, abandoned.
Obviously, we're going to hear details of whatever plan the NHL puts out. But we've learned from what the NBA has said, what Major League Baseball has said, and what Gary Bettman has said at times, is that one case is not going to shut down the playoffs. But what do they do if 6 or 7 players on one team get sick? Does that mean that 6 or 7 players that they on their taxi squad are going to fill in, or are they going to forfeit game? I mean, that'll be interesting to see what what is in place if something like that happens, because they have to plan for that.
Yeah, I think what we'll hear is that circumstances will dictate what happens. In other words, like if it was just 6 players on one team, they'll deal with it like it's an injury. You'll just have to bring in 6 guys and the next man up, just like if you had 6 sprained ankles. What will become complicated if multiple players on both teams, or if it becomes widespread around the tournament. If we're in the semis and all 4 teams, have players and
multiple players.
Yeah. So I think that's what they're saying is if it's contained to one team, I don't think it'll be the number of players. It'll just be, can they, get it cleaned up to the point where they can continue on.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a war. Talk about the playoffs being a war of attrition. I mean, this has the potential to be that and all more.
I mean,
right?
This is riskier, that's for sure.
It's pretty crazy. The other thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and we'll get out of here, but I thought this was really interesting, and that is this. I'm going to share this. That this is the Stanley Cup. On the Stanley Cup, on the 19, there's a 1919 Montreal Canadiens Seattle Metropolitans series never completed ring.
Yeah. 1919 was a bad year. The Black Sox scandal and this.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just kind of. I thought it's really a fascinating story. I mean, I knew about it kind of, but I never really delved into what it was.
But at least that World Series was completed.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah, and if you noticed, if you put up that picture again, the champion in 1918 was the Toronto Arenas, so that meant Toronto kept the cup for an extra year.
They did, and they won it the year after that too.
There you go.
It's caught up to them, Mike.
Yes,
That's true.
53 years of catch-up. Thanks there, Russ.
Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and everybody out there, have a really safe weekend. Maybe by Monday we'll know exactly what's happening. It's possible. I think I'd put it about, at this point, not going to put odds on anything, but it's possible, right?
Anything's possible at this point.
Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. So stay safe out there and enjoy your weekend.